Welcome back to Drop a Line. I'm very excited to be here with you all tonight. We have an amazing guest with us tonight with a book that is an absolute must read. This is Drop a Line. And we are on with Alyssa or A.R.K Watson, depending on what you want to call her. Alyssa, how are you this evening?
I'm doing good. I got my tea. I got my pins, my lucky ones, so we're all good.
We are all good. And by the way, I said this evening because it's evening by me, but I understand it is 11 a.m. by you?
It is
10 a.m. Well, good morning.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for joining us. How are you today? I already said, how are you? How did you hear about the show? I'm curious.
I don't know. I was just playing around on Instagram and came across your account, and you had a post asking for authors, and I was like, yeah, that sounds fun. So, hi.
Perfect. Well, hi. Thank you so much for joining us. You are the latest in a long line of authors who have come on this show and just had a nice, relaxing, but very inspiring conversation, and I'm so glad that you joined us today. So your book has one of my favorite pitches that I have seen on the market. I'm curious, are you traditionally published? Are you self-published?
I'm self-published. What was the pitch that I gave you? Because I don't remember.
The blurb that you shared about the inspirations for your book and what you draw from and the themes in particular that you wanted to capture. We exchanged that just yesterday. I thought that was just absolute gold.
Thanks. So like to catch the listeners up, I have a sci-fi murder mystery, so a big thing I wanted to get into was like I wanted aliens that weren't just rubber mask aliens, and
right.
We can get into all that themes, but the basic premise is it's a sci-fi murder mystery, and this guy thinks that his sister died on Mars like 10 years ago. And then this kid shows up out of nowhere, which freaks him out because he's on a colony on Mars. He knows every single person on his planet, or at least he thought he did. And he doesn't know this kid. And then this kid shows him where his sister's body actually is. And turns out she didn't die 10 years ago. She died like a couple of hours ago. And she was murdered. So he's got to figure out why and how in the world she was surviving outside of the colony, which is supposed to be impossible.
Wow, that is amazing. So one of my favorite things right off the bat is the way you bring genres together in this piece makes just for a very interesting narrative, because the different genres are really woven into exactly how this situation unfolds.
Yeah, definitely. Sci-fi mystery isn't a hugely known genre, but when you start looking for it, there's a lot there. I take a lot of inspiration from Isaac Asimov, who's kind of credited as being the first one, but he's not actually the first one. He's just like the first one to like get known about it. He did a robot mystery trilogy. Based around the 3 laws of robotics, and it's all about they think the 3 laws of the robotics got broken, and they're trying to figure out how. And the essential point that he made about the sci-fi mystery, he was actually given a challenge from his editor, because to have a real true sci-fi mystery, you have to have the science be part of the mystery, which means you have to bring your reader to a point where they understand the science enough that the mystery makes sense, which is very difficult with real science and with made up science or like theoretical science. So you have to be very consistent with those rules.
So. Right, absolutely. So this is a narrative, I can tell right off the bat, that has taken a little bit of work to put together. This is something that is being skillfully composed. And I'm very curious, I'm curious about how the idea came to you. But after that, I'm curious about what was the process like of beginning to really to really put this thing together?
Where do your books come from? That's the Pandora's box question, dude. All right, there's a million different instances that inspired of different scenes and characters and themes.
Yeah.
I can tell you that when I wrote the first, when I started writing in this world, because I didn't end up keeping the short story that inspired the book.
Yeah.
It came from a conversation, a really hard conversation I had with this kid that I barely knew in college. It was our freshman year of college. We were both from different cities and didn't know, what the world was like, and everything was new and scary. And he admitted to me that he thought that his mother would have had a better life if she had aborted him.
Mm-hmm.
She was a single mom. That's really heavy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was just trying to listen and be a good friend, and I didn't really know what to say. I don't know that there's anything I could have said. You can say no, she wouldn't, but you can say that, but you can't make a person believe it. But I went home and I don't know, just started writing, and I wrote about a kid in a very alien planet, kind of struggling with the same thing, and struggling with forgiving his mom for also putting him in the situation he was. But then underneath all of that, he doesn't quite realize yet that what his mother did for herself and for him is actually transforming the entire planet. So, and that became the seed of the mystery.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that really makes sense, actually, for what you were describing about the story. So that's very interesting to hear how that came together for you. And yeah, I have to say it really resonates with me when you're listening to people, or when you're witnessing things out in the world and you really don't know what to say. Eventually, that does come out in your writing. It could be the very next day, it could be somewhere down the road, but when all you can do is really kind of swirl it around up here, we know where it's going to end up.
Yeah.
So.
And then too, I think there was just a list of things that I wanted out of my science fiction that I wasn't seeing from the sci-fi books that I was reading.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I remember a point where I was kind of sketching out the outline. I literally wrote down all the stuff I wanted, and kind of tried to fit it all in. So,
Mm-hmm.
and
Absolutely.
I think that's a great. I definitely recommend that for any author or writer that they don't know what they want to write. Well, you might know what you don't want to read more of, or you're tired of, and then from that you can extrapolate.
Great advice. Great advice. I'm always so inspired on the show because I always have this question ready. What advice do you have? But usually the advice just pours out before I even have the chance to ask that. And I love it. I absolutely love it. I think we're off to a wonderful start. So this is an important story. We're talking about some very important, and not that other stories aren't important. I don't like the implication I just made, but this is a story that really is, that really dives deep. And I'm curious. What was your process of creating the book? Do you want to share anything that was particularly challenging or surprising, or something that was maybe your favorite part of the experience?
One of the cool moments in writing this book was I got to meet John Crawley, and at a writers conference actually, and he was teaching my class, and he begged me not to cut the prologue of the book, not to touch it, which just I was just kind of speechless at that point. And it was really, I really did think about cutting it, because the prologue's from the point of view of the grandmother in the story, not the main character. I thought she was going to be the main character when I was just writing scenes in this world. But then it really turned out that this was Tomas's story because he was the one who really wanted to understand what had happened to his sister. And his mother, Maria's mother too, she wanted to know as well, but she has her own darkness and secrets that she has to grapple with that really distract from the mystery core. And they still come to light and they're part of it, but yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I always love to get that insight into the process. And I see we have questions coming in now. That's when the show really starts heating up. Ariel is asking, what made you pick Mars as the setting versus Earth or a different planet?
So I'm always a big fan of sci-fi, and I loved Firefly, and I love the sense of like the space western and space as the frontier. And I'm incredibly inspired by the Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. That's one of the books that I read every year. And so I wanted to set it not on Earth, and I definitely wanted to set it on Mars just because I was already very much into the romance of the Martian mythos. There's so much we know about Mars now and how it actually is, but then we've also had hundreds of years of people pointing their telescope at the closest planet and trying to figure things out. We have myths about like giant dust storms that entirely cover the planet. So they do cover the planet, but the atmosphere on Mars is so thin that if you were standing in the middle of it, it would just be like, oh, it's so soft. It wouldn't really like knock you off your feet the way it does in Andy Weir's The Martian. But that idea of planet-wide storms is so romantic and cool, and just like, why not? And then I forget the guy that there was some other astronomer who looked up at Mars and he saw canals, and it turns out it was actually like imperfections in the glass of his microscope. But for a while, people legitimately thought that there was a civilization on Mars, and people were building canals and like there was like legends of this planet that's drying out and a civilization that's desperately trying to deal with that and conserve water. So I couldn't not set it on Mars.
I know exactly what you mean. I know that once you're really like neck deep in research and you're looking around for a place to set something, when something really grabs your attention like that, it is so hard to pull yourself away from that. I can remember I had that experience when I decided in this series that I'm about to begin publishing in December, when I decided that far down the road the character is going to be traveling, and is going to be traveling in the East. I started looking around at places, and I came across all of these forests in Africa, and particularly the Congo. And I'm looking through these photos, and I'm just like, okay, well, now it has to happen here. I don't know. I'll revise whatever I have to revise, but we're going here. You know what I mean? Like, it just works out that way sometimes.
Yeah. And the sequels are going to go beyond other planets, so it definitely expands out from there. But we went on the moon. We need to go back to the moon. But Mars right now is the next frontier, and that my list of things I wanted to see more in science fiction is I wanted a little more like near future sci-fi. So I actually don't have a whole lot of technology that we don't already have, or we're not already close to getting. But the sequels do go far future. They do get more space opera and all that, just because that's the natural outgrowth if you're going to write about the continuing move of the frontier.
Absolutely. I love that point. And yes, thank you, Carrie, very much for the Congo. I forgot it was actually suggested to me. So there's a lot of things I forget throughout my day. But yes, I absolutely, I I find that so fascinating. And now I don't just want to read the first book. Now I want to read the entire series. So like I said, when you start to talk about your story, you have a natural talent for really making it interesting before we even know what it's about. Is that something that comes to you naturally, or is that something you've practiced over time?
I don't know, dude. Um, my whole like social media presence and how I talk about and sell myself is something I'm still learning. I
Mm-hmm.
think especially with an author's first book, it's the passion project, is the thing that they want. And then you put it out there and you hope that it finds its audience. And
Mm-hmm.
you find you find your voice as a writer, as an author, but then after you publish your first book, then you realize, oh, now I have to find my voice as like social media presence. And honestly, I don't know, I'm still working on that. So
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
my
Same here.
my strategy is like with social media and just talking about my book is like if I don't care about it, then probably gonna suck at
Mm-hmm.
it. I
Mm-hmm.
gotta like what I'm doing. I gotta enjoy what I'm talking about. I gotta. Um, I'm not a good actor, you know. So I talk about the stuff that makes me happy, that I like to
Mm.
nerd out about, anyways, and try and find my tribe.
Perfect. Wonderful. Couldn't agree more. Ariel is asking, can you tell us a little bit about your main character?
Yeah, so my main character is Tomas Villalobos. He is the youngest son of his family. And it starts when he's in his 30s and he already has his own family. And he's taking care of his mother, who has some memory problems. And one minute she thinks she's like 20 years old, and one minute she thinks she's like 60, and it goes all back and forth. And then he's also he doesn't know why exactly, but he's really racked with guilt from his sister's disappearance because he was
Mm-hmm.
actually the last person to see her alive in the colony. And at the time when he actually saw her leaving the colony, and he didn't. They sleep in the same room. He saw her like leaving the room and leaving home, and he didn't know that that's what she was doing. So he's kind of lived for years with like, what if I'd said something? Like, what was going through? Why could I have done something? Um, and that guilt and like childhood baggage is really starting to. He keeps it under wraps, but when this kid shows up out of the desert, it kind of unravels the walls he put up around that. It starts to affect, um, his family. Um,
Mm-hmm. I think there's just so much to relate to there. You know what I mean? I think that many of us could, from a variety of different experiences and viewpoints, can think back to a time where we felt responsible or we felt drawn to a situation in some way. And you're right, we really didn't know why. It was something that we kind of had to unravel over time. In fact, recently, earlier this week, I had an experience where I felt like this is just something that 6 years later I still hadn't dealt with yet, you know?
yeah, and it's all tied up with family secrets too,
Mm-hmm.
because this is a small town murder, which means that he probably knows the murderer. He probably grew up with them because he knows
Mm-hmm.
everyone in his colony. And his mother's got a lot of secrets. His sister obviously had a lot of secrets. So he sensed them as a child. He knows something's going on. But then this revelation of uncovering what happened to his sister is also about uncovering what's been going on in his
Mm-hmm.
community. Um, Kind of right off the bat, after he finds out about his sister's body, he starts to put together that this boy is probably his nephew. And when he starts to put that together, his wife actually takes him aside and is like, hey, I didn't tell you this because this guy's already dead, but there was one of our teachers when we grew up was a child molester. And your nephew, if he's your nephew, might be a product of rape, and you might
Mm-hmm.
not want to dig deeper. Now, this teacher is already dead,
Mm-hmm.
but this community and the people that he hurt are grown now. but they've grown, they've been hiding it, and they've been dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just like one of the. It's the I don't show any rape, and the main character is not the one who was personally hurt, but it's more about what that does to generations, to community. You know, you don't.
And I think, I'm sorry, go on.
Yeah.
I think that is so important. You know what I mean? I think that's a great way to approach it too, especially when you're considering that, you know, we want the reader to feel close to our stories, and we want the stories to resonate, and we would like for the stories to be something that can really leave an impact. So I think that one of the best things that we can do is just present a character with the emotions and the surrounding, like you said, community, you know, the surrounding fallout and the generational fallout of what these things do, especially since those are the details that always fall through the cracks. Like generational trauma, that's still something that so many people have to be aggressively taught about, you know?
I don't know that it has to be aggressively. I think we haven't figured out the terms and language, the terminology to talk about it yet.
Right.
And I think story is great for that, because you don't have to summarize it all in a soundbite.
Yes. Yes, very, very true. Very true. Carrie asks, I've seen you mention religion in sci-fi. Is that present in your current novel?
Yeah, so one of the other things that I really wanted in science fiction was I just wanted characters that were religious that weren't stupid or evil. Mm-hmm. So, like, my main character is religious. He's Catholic, but you know he has neighbors and friends who are Buddhist and Hindu and Muslim, Jewish, and all sorts of things, and atheist as well. And yeah, I just that's just something that I wanted, because this whole idea of like, oh, in the future we will have left behind religion is makes no sense to me. It's a part of our human nature to tell stories and myths, and you know, to get fooled and to like guess things about the universe and then be wrong about them and guess something else and they'd be wrong about that. And yeah, so I was really inspired by Mary Doria Russell's The Sparrow, which if you Google, I think they label it as Christian inspired. It's not. She's Jewish. And the themes she draws and the questions she asks about suffering all come from Jewish discussions around the Holocaust. And I really like Saladin Ahmed's books. He actually, in a few of his short stories, and then in his like Crescent Moon books, he has a character who's a Muslim exorcist, which is freaking sweet. And I don't know anything about Islamic exorcisms, but from what I can glean from his stories, it has a lot to do with like using the actual words of the Quran. So there's a short story I read in his Engraved on the Eye where there's this guy who's a zombie hunter, and he has like the appropriate Quranic, you know, scriptures for zombie hunting, which I'm so glad exists. And
right, absolutely. You never know when you might need it. Just so you're all aware out there.
Just in case. But I was also inspired by Babylon 5, which is this old sci-fi TV show. Not a lot of people have seen it. It's very hard to find it. You either have to, honestly, you have to bootleg it, or you have to pay like $100 for the DVDs.
Right.
It's nuts. But the first episode of Babylon 5, the setup is that there's like a space station with humans and aliens, and it's kind of like the UN of space. In the first episode, the human director of Babylon 5 station is in an issue, is having a diplomatic issue because one alien who believes in reincarnation is very upset with another alien who believes in capturing souls before they can reincarnate and like asking them wisdom and stuff, which Alien 1 finds very profane. And Alien 2 is like, no, this is good. And so they're fighting. And the human is just like, y'all both crazy. Y'all are both, what? But he has to navigate that and treat both respectfully. And just respect that, okay, this is what they believe. I don't believe it. It's kind of crazy, but they're still beings and they still deserve respect and understanding and benefit of the doubt. And that's a huge theme of the whole series. One of the main characters is Jewish, and there's a point where her rabbi comes up to visit her and is like, hey, your dad died. Why ain't you been to the funeral and all that? And it just makes the story so much richer. It's not about converting anyone or changing anyone. It's just another aspect of diversity in fiction that hasn't really been tapped into yet. And I don't know that I'm going to tap into it but I want to, and I'm going to try. And I'm going to also try to do my research, but yeah.
Well, that is the thing too, is that it always turns into a research project. And that's what can make it so daunting at times. However, just by talking to you, I can tell that you approach everything that you do with such an open mind and are so open to new experiences. And I think that that is just the perfect place to be for conveying so many different characters in a story. Like I can kind of almost see from how you describe it, how that comes together for you. And it certainly seems like the right approach to me.
Well, it's also just part of being a reader, reading about people that are exactly like you when it gets old. It can be nice and affirming, but you need both, and especially with sci-fi and fantasy, you want the newness, you want the strange, you want to experience culture shock in a way. And writing science fiction just gives me an excuse to show up in a mosque and be like, hey, I have questions. Actually researched, because I was a big fan of Ghost in the Shell. Have you seen that anime or familiar with it?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, so it's a cyberpunk anime, and it's about it's like a police procedural in the cyberpunk Japan. But it also deals with a lot of like questions about theme and reincarnation, and like the main character is fully cyborg, and there are people that have a cyborg brain. It's like, well, how does like cybernetics interact with reincarnation? Is a major theme of the series. It's actually very profoundly Buddhist work. And I started digging, and apparently the Dalai Lama said that it is in Buddhism, at least in his branch, theologically possible. He doesn't know that it's happened, but this is fascinating.
It is. It certainly is. It's fascinating to talk with you. I tell you, like just for you to take all of this and to bring it to the discussion just makes for such a fascinating discourse in itself. So thank you very much for being here. Those of you watching, please do ask us questions, leave us comments. Alyssa is here to answer pretty much anything you've got for her. We are live on Drop a Line. If you are enjoying the show, if you are new to the show, thank you very much for joining us. Please hit subscribe on One True Promotions YouTube. Alyssa, around this time, I always like to ask the guest if you have any questions for us, or if there is something we haven't touched upon yet that is important to you to touch upon.
I think the other thing I wanted to talk about was one of the things I wanted on my list of like science fiction things I wanted in there was aliens that weren't just rubber mask aliens, but like actually like their psychology felt alien, or that maybe weren't just mammalian or reptilian, but maybe something from another Linnaean category. So mine I drew from biology and like plants, and also a little bit from sea cucumbers.
Mm-hmm.
Sea cucumbers are really interesting. So one of the cool things that they do is they can eat algae, and then instead of digesting all of the algae, they keep the chlorophyll, the little cells that let them translate sunlight into food, and they put it into their bodies, and then they can do that.
That is fascinating. Wow, that is so cool.
We rag on the medieval world for having myths about phoenixes and all this stuff, and like believing that frogs were born from the mud. But if you don't have a microscope, it does look like frogs just are born from mud.
Right.
The natural world is so really strange, and I think we kind of take that for granted because we have explanations for it. But I mean, like you look at the NASA scientists at the SETI Institute, they do this all the time. They look at extremophiles, so like organisms that are living at the bottom of the ocean near like boiling temperatures near lava vents. There's still life down there. There's still creatures that thrive, and those creatures can give us a hint for what alien life might be like if we encounter that. One of my favorite classes I took in college was a geology class because I actually got a teacher who used to work at the SETI Institute. So we talked about geology, but then we also talked about the geology of the different planets. And every time we went to a different planet, he was like, okay, now, if there was life forms on Europa, this is what we think they would look like. And if there were life forms over here, we think that their blood would actually, have methane in it. And it was fascinating.
Great teacher. Great teacher. Oh, I love it. I wish I could have been in that room, I swear. I had a somewhat similar experience when we were going over the midnight zone in the ocean. I remember being absolutely terrified, but also like entranced because I was like, that's like a whole separate universe down there. That
the midnight
like
zone?
of the ocean, like the very bottom of the ocean.
You went to the bottom of the ocean?
No.
Oh.
No, learning about it in school, I meant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely would have posted about that, I think. But yeah, right. Absolutely. This is where I inform all of you about my adventures in the ocean. But no, I'm not as witty as I would like to be. But yes, I remember being so fascinated by learning about how mysterious that world is down there. And in the series that we're currently writing, my wife to be and I do make, in a certain region, I do make frequent comparisons to the vastness and mysterious of the Midnight Zone and the mysteriousness of the creatures living in it. So it's something that, these are the kinds of things that I know from experience can really kind of just make such a mark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we've got some feedback in the comment section. There's a lot of talk about Babylon 5 going on Instagram. We're trying to figure out what libraries still have it. That's totally cool. We got to be able to find it somewhere. And getting some great feedback from Ariel and Carrie as well. Everybody keep the questions and comments coming. We love them. So we've talked about what your book is about. We've talked about various aspects of it that are extremely important to you and to the reader as well. And we've talked a little bit about the main character. How did some of the side characters come together?
Well, I think they came together just naturally because when I started writing, I didn't know anything about writing a book or story structure or anything like that. So what I would do was I would just write scenes in this world, and characters grew out from that. And then once I started applying a structure and an arc to everything, their roles kind of solidified. But I already had kind of a small town setting, so I had like a list of characters, like this is the sheriff, this is the mayor, this is the doctor, all that jazz. Originally, like I think I mentioned this before, but originally I thought the point of view character was going to be the grandmother. So a lot of the earlier stuff I wrote was written in scenes where she's young, where she's a young woman and scientist who's just arrived on Mars. She's actually the principal exobiologist on the planet, who so it's called the Vines of Mars because I have Mars. Part of the reason why they can live on Mars and like breathe is that is because of the vines. And every science fiction, they say, gets at least one Deus Ex Machina. Even the hard sci-fi have something. Like nobody has gravity gravity machines on space unless you have something spinning. Right. But yeah, so I have these vines that appear on Mars after an asteroid lands on the planet. And so they're not sure if the vines were inside the asteroid or if they were lying dormant underneath the Martian crust, which is unlikely but theoretically possible and something that NASA scientists have floated around. Because we know that there was water on Mars and there was possibly plant life on Mars. And we know that plants can live and survive in crazy conditions. If you look at Death Valley, it's the driest place on Earth. And it rains maybe once every 50, 100 years. But every time it does, there's this huge outgrowth of plants out of nowhere that were just lying dormant underneath the sand. So I have something like that happens on Mars. And I have these giant vines that cover the planet, kind of like kudzu. And they pump a lot of oxygen into the air. There's already carbon dioxide, so they can breathe and they release what we need. So they give us not like a great atmosphere on Mars, but a livable one. Think like Andes Mountains. But they also go after water ferociously in any form they can get it, which includes so they basically like spear people and eat them and suck them dry.
Wow.
So she is charged, Vanya comes to Mars because she is charged with studying them and trying to figure out how to tame them or alter them or come up with some sort of like chemical spray that can like at least slow their growth or make it manageable so that they don't get these plant attacks in the
colony. Right.
She accomplishes that. And then the next part of the story really became about when she's an old woman and kind of the repercussions of other choices that she made. So,
I love it.
Yeah, so a lot of the side characters came from things like that, where I was just writing other scenes that turned out not to end up in the book, but have an effect on the book.
Awesome. That is so cool. I love hearing all that. And I cannot wait to read it, honestly, just to see those creatures. That sounds so cool. So unbelievably cool. Ariel is asking, which character do you connect the most with? Loving the questions, everybody. Loving them.
I mean, they're all in my head. But I guess I think maybe not the beginning, but certainly after I'd spent so much time writing the book from his point of view, I think maybe the point of view character, just because I ended up spending the most amount of time with him. Yeah, which is funny because not a lot of people guess it because he's like a mid-30s Hispanic man.
Right.
But he's a human being, so.
Absolutely. My first character was a 16-year-old girl. And I found out actually in Barker's Rules, it was a 16-year-old girl and a serial killer who was holding her prisoner. And I connected very well to the serial killer. And it turned out I had no idea how to connect to a teen girl. So I actually had to really kind of, broaden my perspective a little bit for that. So, yeah, I mean, it's, but you're right. They're all human. You know what I mean?
Sorry, I had a glitch out. Did it
That's all right.
glitch out here for you? Okay. Yeah, and I mean, I think part of it too is I think there's this push right now in publishing to have like own voices, which is a good conversation to have, and I think completely legitimate. But it's really complicated for me because I'm a white woman.
Mhm.
I'm Catholic. But not everyone in my family looks white. Like we are white, but I don't know, just genetics. So our relationship with that has always been like, I don't know what my kids are going to look like. And then I ended up marrying another mixed man. So I don't know. And then also I'm a Catholic, but I'm a convert. So I didn't grow up Catholic.
Mhm.
So like the heritage I grew up with, I feel very disassociated from. And then the people are like, oh, then you should relate to other white Catholics. And like other white Catholics are Italian and Eastern European cultures, which are fantastic, wonderful cultures. I don't know anything about that. And but the people I ended up uh, being around were Hispanic Catholics, so it just weirdly felt more normal for me. Um,
Right. Right. And that's what's so fascinating about the creative process is that, the deeper in we go, it really does sort of reveal um, what or who we connect to. And, it can be such a transformative process just to write a single book. I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
no, I didn't say anything. I just agreed.
Okay. I think we have time for about one more before I believe we might be having a guest reading tonight. If I'm not mistaken, I think that would be totally awesome, especially since this story sounds absolutely delightful. First, though, I would like to take Melody Reese's question. Are there plans for an audiobook release in the future?
I would like that. I want to get some of the sequels out first before I do that. But if you know anyone that can do a bunch of international accents for my very international cast,
Mm-hmm.
send me a message because I think that would be the complicated part of getting an audiobook.
Right? Sure. You will be the first to know. I can promise you that. As soon as we find somebody who can do that, we will let you know immediately. This has been an absolutely wonderful interview, and I'm really grateful to you for joining us tonight. I hope you've enjoyed the experience of being here. This is what we do. This is Drop a Line. We get together with authors. We have nice, chill, informative conversations, and we usually offer to hear some of your art. Would you like to share some of your book with us at this time?
Sure, yeah. I'll read you guys the prologue part. So it's the part that John Tolley told me not to cut. So all right. How far should I go? Like 500 words? I don't know what.
Yeah, we usually read for about a minute or two. So,
Okay, just give me a little wave.
yep, you got it.
All right. So the second team found the astronaut skeletons wrapped in a coniferous cocoon of vines, their blood now feeding the flowers that bloomed around them in great cascading walls of greenery. The alien vines were what filled the air with oxygen, what warmed the atmosphere, that later Hicopatriots would bolster and augment as needed, directing the burgeoning environment into a second cocoon for humanity. But first, the vines sent out feelers like great intelligent Venus flytraps, chasing the second astronauts back into their shell. Life began on Mars the way life always begins, in a holy darkness between communities of small, hopeful stars. It formed, grew, and had its being long before the rest of humanity perked up from their stubbornly practical tempered wine glasses. We knew it would happen eventually. We had taken the precautions that we had the time and resources for. But like all life, it took everyone by surprise. Before the people in stiffly air conditioned cotton collars admitted that it came for our blood, we only knew of it as a curiously large comet. It appeared out of the icy Oort cloud and winked saucy greetings at the naive robots mining our asteroid fields. When a few lonely scientists spelled out the message on their calculators, the world braced for death, and in the last minute throes of labor wrought out life. We deflected it. The moon-sized comet and its playful cloud of asteroids streaked across Bangkok's night sky to crash instead into the face of Mars and spread its wet fingers across the expanse of two dead oceans. She watched the drama unfold in the fierce winter of break rooms, and through the screen of her media, feeling one in terror with the rest of her helpless race. She had not known they would come for her then, but first they came for the world. Humans, in white and silver tubes, landing like locusts on the green summer dirt. Out of the flood of water that came with the comet, 1,000 vines had split from the skin of the planet in the largest and most impossible desert bloom humankind had ever seen. She'd watched her family sit, stunned, around the hollowed glow of their screen, the light of a new heaven dazzling their imaginations. The reanimation of the planet's magnetic field had been enough of an astronomical anomaly. Scientists were stalwart in the discipline of never using that tainted word miracle. But it had been an invisible miracle for scientists, for the high minds that escaped the mundane and cracked open beer cans in NASA break rooms where she worked. When her toddlers rolled on the floor before the TV and laughed at the green light reflecting on each other's faces, she knew she would leave them soon. But then the film stuttered, the voices muffled, and the signal dropped. Mars was silent, and so was the first team, and she gained a little time while they searched. But even after they found blossoms burgeoning out of sockets and stomach, the second team never fully recovered the lost astronauts' bodies.
Wow. That is amazing. I cannot wait to get my copy. I absolutely adore the way you put the perfect words together. That was an absolutely lovely read to listen to. Very well written and read. I hope everybody enjoyed that. What'd you think of that? We've got melody. I love this voice you've written in, poetic like an ancient myth, but concrete and transportive. Yes, absolutely. It has, you have such a zest for poetic prose, but you're not only vivid in your science fiction descriptions, but you don't waste words. You're very clear. I was absolutely transported. That was amazing. I'm definitely getting a copy. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. And that usually is around the time we start to wrap up the show. Do you have any closing remarks for us, Alyssa?
So if you are like me and you're interested in the intersection of science fiction questions and how that relates with world religions, and you're from like a different faith than what I have, please DM me, because I'm actually interested not only for my own research. I'm interested in maybe like having some of these conversations on Instagram Live myself. Maybe we can come on and we can talk about like if you're Hindu and you pray through yoga, how would you do that if you lived on in a zero G environment? Would it change? Would it change any of the meaning? I don't know. Come tell me. Let's talk about it. Let's figure it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love it. Definitely, everybody, keep your eye on A.R.K. Watson's account, because we are going to be there's going to be some great discussion opportunities there. And how can we best support you, Alyssa?
Buy the book, leave a review anywhere.
Mm-hmm. And we can follow you at A.R.K. Watson and at arkwatson.com, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm on Instagram and I'm on TikTok. So
perfect. TikTok users unite. All right, and that is about it for the show. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This was an absolutely wonderful conversation, and I love what you do. I love how passionately and skillfully you are doing it, and I wish you all the best, and want you to know that One True Promotion, everybody, is here to support you, to put up a post when you'd like us to put up a post, to get the word out when you need it. We are here to support you all the way, so please do keep in touch and come back to Drop a Line anytime.
Thanks, Alec, for making this platform and this community. This is an absolute delight.
It is our pleasure, and we will see you next time. You have a wonderful day. And that is our show for this evening. Thank you, everybody, for dropping by. As Carrie says, this was Drop a Line.